Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Lainey. Hi, Grace.
Hey. Hello.
Hi, everyone. It's another episode of Writers to Watch. Lainey, Grace, and I are here. I think I'm in California, San Francisco. Whoa, earthquake. Um, and we're so glad you're here with us to listen in, and we can catch you up on some news and then bring on some really wonderful authors tonight. So we have a lot to get to, a lot of different types of books tonight, and for wonderful authors. So we're really looking forward to this. So, Lainey, Grace, let's talk about it.
What are we gabbing about?
Well, we have Brianna Labuskes will be on talking about the BOXCAR Librarian, and Will Leitch will talk about his new book, Lloyd McNEIL'S Last Ride. And Maxym Martineau will talk about her book, House of Blight. And Elise Hooper will be on to talk about the Library of Lost Dollhouses. So some really, really interesting books. And as I said, very different from each other. So do we have any housekeeping slides before we get to the interviews?
Yeah. And just a reminder, we have some fun behind the scenes photos from some of our books. So be sure to stick around for all of that fun stuff. But the next, we could drum roll. We have a couple of episodes of Writers to Watch confirmed for the new year. And January is like crazy big, y'all.
Tomorrow, basically.
I know, let's not talk about that, but it's crazy big.
Yeah.
And yeah, Virginia, when
Go
I'm
ahead.
ready to push the button.
I'm ready. Here we go. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
Go ahead, Lainey.
We have Mary Alice Monroe. We have Blair Underwood with his co-author Joe McLean. We have Kevin Wilson. We have Tennessee Hill, debut author, and Jeffrey Self. Like, we have 5 authors. We're going big in 2025. And all these authors said very quickly, like, can't wait, be there. And it's going to be a cool conversation. I mean, we have always really great writers to watch episodes. This one today, I mean, I kind of was like the dream cast. I love all of these authors. This one, I'm like, these are so exciting too. Like, I kind of can't believe it. We're just got a great 2025, end of 2024, going out with a bang and starting with a bang.
It'll be our two year anniversary of Writers to Watch next month too. We started it in
Oh,
January 2023.
yeah,
So
we should wear
That's
hats.
true.
we should wear hats, and we should tell all of them to wear hats.
Okay, I love that. I wish
That's
we
not
had
all,
told,
folks.
but wait, there's more.
We already have February confirmed. So go ahead, Virginia. You go.
Oh, all right. So listen, Alison Bechdel. Hello. How fun is that? This is going to be just so much fun. Jess Walter, his new book, so great. Meg Mitchell Moore, Christopher Moore, and Uzma Jalal. How do you pronounce her last name? Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin. I apologize for that. Yeah, so there we go. 2 months in the books. So mark your calendars and be sure to join us. We don't have March, do we?
Not yet.
Okay.
Few,
Okay, we have a few.
but
Well,
look out. It's March 11th is the date, and I don't know. Should we reveal one
yeah,
or
do
should we
it.
make them
Who do
up?
we have so far?
Well, we have. Let me think. Laura Lippman
Love.
and Susan Wiggs.
Oh my
Those are
God.
the 2 that were already confirmed, and like even more coming. I'm telling you, everybody's like, let's get in on this. It's gonna be so exciting. Like we all were stoked making the list, and we're stoked as they come in.
Yeah,
So
they're all just coming in like crazy, and Lainey's email's blowing up. Yes, yes, yes. Want to do it? Yes, yes, yes. Please, please, please.
my
So
favorite
anyway,
email.
that's the next couple of months. So please mark your calendars, and I think that's it before we get to the interviews. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So without further ado, what we do is we interview each author for about 5 minutes, ask them to talk about their book, And then what we'll do is bring all of the authors back on at the end, and then we invite you to write in questions. So do that throughout, and we will get to all of them at the end. But right now we're just gonna, do a quick 5-ish minute talk with the authors, get a snapshot of the book, and then but so please have your questions ready. All righty. So Elise Hooper, are you there to talk about your book, The Library of Lost Dollhouses? You can turn on your.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. Should I turn my video on?
Sure.
Okay. I think there. Ooh, wait.
Hello. There you are.
Here I am. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to see you, Virginia. Last time I saw you were in Austin, Texas.
I was just going to say we were in Texas.
Yeah.
We've definitely done the library conference circuit, Elise, and you've been so supportive of librarians and everything that they do, and your books are so wonderful, and
thank
we
you.
are super excited to have you on tonight to talk about the Library of Lost Dollhouses. So the book is coming out April 1st, 2025. So lots of time to download and read it and love it, which you will. There's so much to talk about in this book. And I'm going to do a brief introduction of Elise and then have her talk about her book and show some images that were sort of the background of the book, things that were incentives and just, her houses within her houses, which is unbelievable. Okay, so Elise, a native New Englander. Elise Hooper spent several years writing for television and online news outlets before getting an MA and teaching high school literature and history. Her debut novel, The Other Alcott, was a nominee for the 2017 Washington Book Award. More novels, Learning to See, Fast Girls, and Angels of the Pacific followed, all centered on the lives of extraordinary but overlooked historical women. Hooper now lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 teenage daughters. And this new book, which you're going to hear about now, is this wonderful new novel about a young librarian who discovers historic dollhouses and embarks on a journey to uncover the hidden secrets behind the intricate miniatures. So Elise, tell everyone what you want them to know about the Library of Lost Dollhouses.
Well, thank you so much, Virginia. Thanks for that introduction. As I said, am delighted to be here. The Library of Lost Dollhouses is a novel about a mysterious collection of dollhouses that reveal the secrets of their former owners. And these former owners are all noteworthy women of the early 1900s, but they're all fictional. So my past few books have been what we call sort of biographical fiction based on real women. This novel is completely fiction. However, I did have some history on which I based it. I started this novel in really about the fall of 2020. I had turned in Angels of the Pacific, my World War II book set in the Philippines. And, this was fall of 2020. I couldn't do very much. I was stuck in my house here in Seattle. And I looked around, and on my office floor, it was this old family dollhouse we have. Lainey, can you put my first slide up? So we have this old family dollhouse. You can see on the top left, there it is. It's nothing fancy. This was built for my great grandmother, we believe around 1896. And you can see, if you look really closely at that photo on the top left-hand side, there's like peeling wallpaper. There were water stains. The outside was all chipped. It was a mess. But if you look over at the far right, I stripped it all. I took off all the wallpaper and I got rid of just all the yuck, repainted. And then in the middle is sort of basically how it looks today, although I'm always making changes. That's the great thing about a dollhouse. Nothing is permanent. There's a little living room picture with bookshelves that I have been steadily filling with books since I started this, and the kitchen. So I've made most of the pieces, and I have also refurbished a lot of my great-grandmother's things. So this dollhouse, this was sort of a large part of my research for this novel. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write about dollhouses. I'm working on my great-grandmother's dollhouse. What now is the story, though? So I dug in a little bit to the history of dollhouses, and fun fact, the first person to ever own a dollhouse was Albrecht V in the 16th century. He was the Duke of Bavaria, and he owned his own dollhouse as a way of showing off his wealth. And this is actually than sort of the trend that holds for dollhouses over the next few centuries. They are largely display cases for like, if you're wealthy and you can have stuff in miniature, like think of how luxurious that is. You have just money to burn, basically. And so I was aware of these 17th century dollhouses from the Golden Age in Holland. I love those. Jessie Burton wrote The Miniaturist about those, and I loved that book. I knew that wasn't quite where I was going, though. Can we have our next slide, please?
Mhm.
And that's when I found kind of this whole other world of really like 20th century miniaturists and dollhouses. Frances Glessner Lee is the woman in the top left-hand side. She was a fascinating heiress with two passions, forensics and miniatures. You know, an unlikely pairing, but she made it work. And what she did was she created these, what are called the nutshells studies of unexplained death. And they were crime scenes, essentially, like even little dead bodies in them and arson, all kinds of things, murder. She showed it all. And the idea was that she gave them to law enforcement to use to study, like look for clues to solve a crime. As I said, these were kind of graphic and kind of gory in some cases. That is not really my thing. I don't like scary things, but I loved the idea of clues to a life all living in a dollhouse. So I kind of ran with that idea. And that's what really colored then this whole idea for my novel was a dollhouse maker through the 1900s who is making dollhouses for women who have something part of their life that they've hidden that they want someday to come out. And some other dollhouses that inspired me while I was working on this was Queen Mary's dollhouse, which is fantastic. It's at Windsor Castle. It has running water, electric, full electricity, an elevator. It has a library with original works in it from A.A. Milne, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Edith Wharton, I think, contributed a book of poetry, a tiny, tiny little book of poetry. This was something that Queen Mary decided in the wake of World War I. She wanted to lift the nation's spirits, and she thought, what better way to do that than to build a dollhouse? And she enlisted all English companies to contribute their sort of most iconic things in miniature to this dollhouse. So the dollhouse had tiny cars, all kinds of kitchen, art, all kinds of things filled it. And 1.5 million people came to see this dollhouse when it was done. And that kind of teed me off on a little clue too, is that like dollhouses sort of become popular when people are kind of when people are down. And so you'll see when I talk about the Thorn Rooms down there on the left, and even Walt Disney, the 1930s was also a time when a lot of people made dollhouses a way to lift spirits and pass them around so that they would raise money for all different kind of causes. There's the Stettheimer dollhouse that was made by Carrie Stettheimer in the early 1900s. She reproduced her family's home and then created had this original art made by some of her artistic friends like Marcel Duchamp. The Thorn Rooms was built, as I said, by Narcissa Thorne, another heiress who wanted to recreate famous interiors from Europe and America. And so she enlisted and employed all these artisans, architects, everything who otherwise wouldn't have found work in the 1930s. And she built about 68 of these dioramas, many of them which are now at the Art Institute of Chicago. And then probably the most famous miniaturist of all, although I doubt many of you even know he was a miniaturist, was Walt Disney. His original vision for Disneyland was a traveling miniatures show called Disneylandia. And he wanted all these little dioramas to travel around the country and show people how America, the sort of golden age of the United States. But he then realized like he couldn't really make enough money just to get people crowd around miniatures. He needed to go bigger, and his idea grew. So all of these dollhouses and miniaturists really helped shape this book about a woman who is making dollhouses, as I said, for these women in her life. Oh, and so we can go to the next slide now too. And all her clients are women who they're fictional, but they're sort of based on real women here. So I have Dorothy Levitt, who is a famous car racer and wrote this book called what was it called? The Woman and the Car, a chatty little handbook for all women who motor or who want to motor. And I mean, that's a title that just rolls off the tongue. But I just loved her adventurous spirit. Amelia Earhart is well known to people. Osa Johnson was an adventurer around the world with her husband. Edith Vane Tempest Stewart was one of the first women in England during World War I to donate her great house to be a hospital to officers. And then the Codebreakers of Arlington Hall. We know, of course, more and more more has come out of these women, but there were 15% of the women who worked there were Black, and yet their work is still classified and not really known. All of these women, very different women, helped to shape sort of the women clients of this novel. And then Isabella Stewart Gardner, my library in which this mysterious collection of dollhouses are found, it's fictional, based in San Francisco, but it's largely inspired by Isabella Stewart Gardner and her wonderful museum in Boston. So that is a quick look at my novel. Of course, I could talk a lot more, but I am so eager to hear about these other books. So thank you so much for letting me chat about the Library of Lost Dollhouses.
Elise, this is wonderful. And I have so many questions that we'll get to, but I love the history behind these and the characters, the historical characters that have sort of just sort of informed you. As I say, this is a novel, but informed by so many great women, and
Thanks,
the
Virginia.
stories that are hidden, and the stories that need to be told and are told. And I can't wait to hear you talk more about the messages that
Thank
you
you.
that are in the houses.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will. This book was by far my most fun book to write. I can say that hands down. Thank you.
Well, and it is a bit of a departure
Yeah.
from your other books in a way. And so I think this is just this is great fun, but also so fascinating. And you've got an Instagram page that you've got to go to, because Elise Hooper is a wordsmith, but she is also quite an artist, and you will see the creations that she's made on her page. It's fascinating. So
Thank you so
okay.
much. Thank
Yep. Thanks, Elise. We'll be back.
you.
Okay. And next we're going to hear from Will.
Will, are you there? It's me, Lainey.
Oh, hello. Hi. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Hi, I know. We were just saying it's nice because we've had you on a few programs for your last couple books, and I know how lucky I was. Just like, oh my goodness, I love this book so much. So I'm happy to have you on for the next book, Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I'll happily tell you. Oh, hey, it's right there. I hadn't even noticed. It's up.
I have a little bio, and then I want you to tell
Of
us
course.
all about it because I don't want to. You have a great bio, and I want to tell them. So, Will Leitch is contributing editor at New York Magazine, a columnist for the Washington Post, and the founder of the late sports website Deadspin. He is the award-winning author of the novels How Lucky, an Alex Award winner. That's for youth, for good for YA and adults. And like I said, that was probably our first time doing. You came to ALA, I think, virtually. And The Time Has Come, and two works of nonfiction, God Save the Fan and Are We Winning? And he writes regularly for the New York Times, NBC News, The Atlantic, and MLB.com. That's your bio, and we want to hear more about the new book, Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride. Go over to you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, so this is my third novel. They're actually all in the same universe. So one of the things I really enjoyed about writing How Lucky was I live in Athens, Georgia, and it takes place in Athens, and The Time Has Come also did. It's all in the same universe. There are characters that cross over, but don't worry, if you haven't read the other two, you are able to walk in cold. Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride is about a police officer named Lloyd McNeil. He is a divorced father of a teenage boy, and one day he learns that he is dying. He learns that he is dying. He has 3 months to live. He has a brain tumor, and he's obviously very concerned about this. He learns and he's kind of trying to figure out what kind of world he's going to leave for his son. He discovers in the paperwork of his police pension that if he dies in the line of duty, his son will inherit roughly 30 to 40 times more than if he dies of his tumor. And so he puts together this plan to basically try to get himself killed in the line of duty. The problem is I guess such as it is that he keeps failing. He keeps throwing himself into ridiculously dangerous situations, ends up failing, but because people keep witnessing these things that are accidentally heroic, he becomes like a civic hero, and he becomes like this a bit, almost like an accidental social media sensation as he is just trying to desperately get himself killed. And so, which is to say, the book is obviously there's a sadness to it, but it is also hopefully funny because Lloyd is the son of a disgraced police chief from a previous generation. He is actually wants to be a kind of new kind of police officer in a way that like very much conflicts with what the kind that his father was. And he's also, very concerned, not just about his son, but about the world his son and kids his age are going to inherit. And so he begins writing throughout the book what he calls the 10 gentle edicts of Lloyd McNEIL. And there are these ways, like these little bits of wisdom, or hopefully he's able to like lend some sort of advice for his son, who is 13, but of course has so much life to live that while he will be gone. So the book is told in the first person narrative in real time, in the present tense. But throughout it, every few chapters, there's one of Lloyd's little letters that he kind of leaves for his son to be found afterwards. So hopefully it's a funny book, but also has a sort of sadness. It was kind of inspired by the idea. I have two sons. I live here in Athens, Georgia, with my wife, and my two sons. They are 13 and 10. And I think anyone that knows when you have kids around that age, they start to become less interested in you than they were not that long ago. And so there's a sense I think every parent has of the kids almost just kind of like falling out of your grasp and needing you a little bit less, and realize that they only have so much time left to listen to me. And I think that and I found that very in the micro, a very compelling sort of thing, but also in the macro. I think there's any parent has a worry about the world that we're leaving for them, and all of the problems that we in previous generations have created that we're kind of relying on them to fix. And so that kind of existential worry that I think everybody has about what kind of world that's going to be left for them, particularly after we're gone, is something that I think ties into very much what Lloyd kind of writes about. And there's a thriller aspect to it as well. His father was unable to solve a crime, and Lloyd ends up potentially being able to be of service in that, as he is kind of also trying to figure out a way, to say goodbye and to kind of wrap things up for himself. So hopefully it's a bittersweet, fun, funny book. I tried to make sure it's funny. Lloyd is a very funny guy, and so I think that hopefully people will find some warmth in him. But I like the idea of doing a book about that feeling that any parent has of wanting to hold on and hopefully and not knowing if your children are listening to you anymore and wanting to tell them everything while they still can. Is something I hopefully was a compelling kind of idea to tie to, I think a pretty hopefully entertaining concept.
Oh, so true. I mean, all of your writing, I think you do such a good job with that balance, because one minute I got a tear, and then the next I'm laughing, and you write especially this relationship between the son and the dad. You can feel that love, he just can't hold on. He just wants to do so much for him. He wants to sacrifice so much for him, and it's such a beautiful read. But like you said, it's like hopeful. There's, a good balance in there, and the like interstitials of his edicts of life were really great. Probably one of my favorite parts. And I'm so glad you brought up your kids, because for the last book, The Time Has Come, you did a little promo video for us, and you had some guests, and they're just so stinking cute that I'm going to put the link in here so everybody can go see them rep your books a little. Yeah. So
They're older but still cute. But if
I'm
you're not
sure.
certain, just ask them. They will happily.
I'm sure they are. Thank you. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you more in a minute.
Yes.
And then, oh, me again though. We're gonna ask Maxym to come on, and I'll get to that video in just a second. Once I'm done introducing, I'll put it in the chat. Hi, Maxym, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Okay, we have House of Blight up. Thank you so much for coming on. I've already told you, like, this book has kept up so much space in my mind in the last, some odd months I've read it. I read it back in June, I think. I was so excited, and you were saying, you're working on book 2, and I'm like, selfishly, I'm like, yes, get them in. I need to know what happens next. Yeah, so thanks for being here to talk about it with us.
Sure.
So Maxym Martineau is an associate creative director by day and a fantasy author by night. She's the author of the Beast Charmer and Guild of Night series. When she's not getting heated over broken hearts, she enjoys playing video games, binge watching television shows, competing in just about any sport, and of course, reading. And you're here to tell us about your new romantic gothic fantasy duology. This is book 1, House of Blight. And like I said, I couldn't put it down, count down the days to the next one. So tell us all about House of Blight.
I mean, I've heard from a number of people that the ending is very unwell, so I apologize to anyone who read it early and now has to wait until book 2 comes out. It's going to be a little bit, but good news, it is in, so you can blame the editors now instead of me. So, House of Blight is about this disease-ridden realm, basically. There's this creeping, grotesque kind of illness that's sort of unexplained, and regular human society and mortals have just sort of accepted it as commonplace, and they've learned to live with it. But there's another subset within the society called Evers, or Everkind, and they are your quintessential immortal Fae adjacent characters, with really beautiful glamours and bestial features that they like to show off from time to time, and very, very aristocrat level of entities, we'll say. And they don't like this blight, and they don't like the idea of anything encroaching on their immortality. And they have been ruthlessly searching for a way to find a cure for it and eradicate it. So the main female character, her name is Adira, and she has a rare life-saving power, which is the ability to see life's threads and stitch them back together, which essentially heals or cures the ailment in question. However, every time she does this, it severs her own life threads. So she essentially has to sacrifice a bit of her lifespan to take care of someone else. And because of that, she doesn't let anybody know about her power or what she does, because in the past, thread menders have been sort of like kidnapped and abducted and like traded for like gain of others. And then they end up dying very early in life, like because they're being forced to heal and take care of other people instead of take care of themselves. So she's just minding her own business, like trying to get by. Her parents died of blight way in the past, and she's got 2 teenage-esque almost men, younger brothers that she feels very like paternal and responsible for. And unfortunately, they catch blight very early in the book, and she can't heal them because, lo and behold, blight is the only ailment that has never been successfully cured by a thread mender, by an ever, by anything. So she knows that if she tries to cure them, she's going to die anyway. But if she doesn't cure them, they die. And then does she want to live in a world where they die? Not necessarily. Enter the really hot, attractive, Fae-esque male lord who presides over the town. And he is on a mission to find a cure for blight because his grandmother, the matriarch of the Fernglow family, has contracted it. And again, these immortals do not like the idea of anything stealing their mortality. They shouldn't even be able to get sick. They don't understand why. And so he strikes a deal with Adira and says, I have the ability to place like them in a stasis, and that will give you time to learn more about your magic, see if we can combine our magics and come up with a way to get rid of the blight and eradicate it. And then your brothers are safe, and my grandmother is safe, and we can go on our merry little way. And he kind of catches her right in this moment of when it's like, you have to choose like right now, or you just walk away kind of thing. And so she decides, you know, F it, basically. I'm going to do anything to save my brothers. And she enters into this contractual agreement with the head of the Fernglow estate to try and find a cure to an uncurable illness without killing herself in the process. So that's the setup for the book. And of course, as you mentioned, it is a romantic gothic fantasy. So there is a romance, and I love romance and will always write romance. And yeah, it's definitely got some of those tropes, those like enemies to lovers, forced proximity. But it's also gothic and largely inspired a lot by like Dorian Gray and Mask of the Red Death. And so you get into this estate in this manner where you're never really quite sure who's telling the truth. And Evers have the ability to, much like Fae, like bind things contractually with their words, and there's magic in words. And so she's like constantly having to second guess and be extremely cunning and find ways to outsmart a family, because there's about 9 of them. And that she has to navigate around and live with and try and find her place, and also not fall in love with the really hot guy who's may or may not hold her brother's life in her hands. So that's the overview of the book.
That's perfect. Yeah, no, you're right. The house is like this cottage core, I feel like,
Yeah.
but it's got this like darkness. It's a character in itself.
It is.
So
It's a character in and of itself. And the matriarch, very, very classic Gothic. Like, is she a ghost or not? Nobody knows.
my favorite. That's
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite subgenres. Like, are you a
Yeah.
ghost or not? I don't know.
Ghost, who
Um,
knows?
but I just want to point out you're getting like so many great reviews on this, like Alona Andrews and Thea Guanzin. But
Yeah.
Alexa Martin, author of Better Than Fiction, said the perfect mixture of romantic fantasy at its finest, but then the perfect mixture of magic, romance, and darkness. This is a romantasy every reader needs on their shelves.
Mhm.
So these are great quotes coming in, and thank
I
you
was,
for telling me.
oh my gosh, so touched by all of them, by Faye's, by Nisha did a beautiful one too that like had me in tears, and so did Iona Andrews. Theirs was, I was just so shocked. I'm still grateful for it. I'm going to post about them soon enough. I just was trying to get my book 2 in, and I haven't done any social content in the past 2 weeks because I've been in a hole writing book 2, because y'all need book 2, because the ending is an ending, we'll say.
Yeah, no, totally work on that.
It's in now, so now I can start doing more stuff on social again.
I love it. Oh, thank you. We'll bring you back on in just a second,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna hand it over to Grace.
Thanks, Lainey. I am excited to talk to our final author, Brianna Labuskes. Come say hello.
Hello. Hi, Grace.
Oh,
Thank you for
hi.
having me.
Oh my God, thank you for being here. You and I haven't talked in like 2 years, so this was
I
such
know.
a
Well, as you were saying, it's your 2-year anniversary. I think I must have been one of your first
yeah,
guests
I
like
think so.
2 years ago.
Sure, yeah, and we're so happy you're here, and you're going to tell us about your newest historical fiction novel, The BOXCAR Librarian, that's on sale March 4th. It's this fantastic story about 3 strong women and books and mystery, and there's a queer love story in there. But I'm going to read a short bio before I pass it off to you. You are the USA Today bestselling author of the historical fiction novels, The Librarian of Burned Books, and The Lost Book of Bon, as well as 9 thrillers. For the first decade of your career, you worked as a journalist for national news organizations covering politics and policy. So I'm going to pass it off to you because you have a lot of fun images as well that I want to make sure that everyone gets to see.
Yeah. And you can actually bring up the first one if you want. Yeah, so the Boxcar Librarian is kind of what it says on the tin. It's a story about this library that was a boxcar. So a couple years ago, I kind of lived in Montana for a few months and went to just this like local museum outside of like fort outside of Missoula, and they had this boxcar there. It was preserved. I got to go in and got to see the library shelves and how it was set up, and this was before I was writing historical fiction. I just thought it was so cool. I was like, oh my gosh, there was this library that was created for the sole purpose of bringing books to these men who were out in like the wilds of Montana. And, we're talking 1920s. So there was very few, they were very isolated. Their families weren't allowed to go with them to live at the camps, except for like in rare instances. They were just working these brutal hours in brutal weather, and this librarian who was the daughter of this wealthy man in Missoula came up with an idea to create this boxcar that would go to all the camps and bring them books, which to me was like catnip because I love the idea of books being light in the dark and like bringing comfort and bringing community to people. And this wealthy librarian, she convinced the owner of one of the mining companies to create this boxcar, and he was like, no one's going to read these books. He's like, I'm going to do it because your family is wealthy and influential, but no one's going to read these books. And it was wildly successful. All these men were like raring for all these books. They had nonfiction and they had westerns, and they would gather in the boxcar on Sundays and just like read together. And there was like a vitrola so they could like listen to music, and there were newspapers so they could like be connected to the outside world. And everything about this was like sparking my little brain of like, I love how books can bring people together. And so I just kind of held on to it for a while. And when I got finished writing, World War II, my two World War II novels, I kind of wanted to move into something a little different. And this idea just kept screaming at me. But the way that I like writing books, all of my books actually, is like having multiple timelines. And so I kind of had this as a baseline, as a one of the timelines, one of the points of view. I based the character in this. Her name's Alice, but she's based on Ruth, who was the librarian who created this. I don't tend to write about real characters just because it limits the story a little bit. But I did take a lot of inspiration from her, and I want to make sure that she's mentioned whenever I talk about this book because she's so cool. And so I knew that was going to be a storyline. And then I just started researching Montana in the 1920s. And you pretty much can't read like a single chapter of a book about Montana in the 1920s without stumbling over Union strife. And so you start researching, you had these copper kings who were in charge of politicians. They owned the newspapers, they owned the businesses, they owned the priests, they were in the pockets of like everybody. And there was just like a handful of really powerful men who just ran Montana at the time. And you had these union organizers who were pushing back. There were deadly massacres in the streets. There were union organizers who were killed. And so that really resonated with me for multiple reasons. One, because I do think you're seeing a little bit more of a union push right now. And I love writing historical fiction that shows the patterns of human history. And so, like, anytime that I can recognize something that's happening now and relate it back to the past, I think that makes the story stronger. It makes readers connect to it more. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But I also think one of the themes you're going to see throughout is community, and the basis of union organizing is community. And so I was like, oh, it's perfect. It fits perfectly with the boxcar. And so that out of that storyline, Colette, who is another point of view, was born. And then my third one, I have three points of view, was Millie. And she is based on, she is a part of the New Deal project, which I always loved. I always thought it was so cool that the government decided to like invest in creativity and decided that writers and artists and actors were worth saving during the Depression. And so everybody knows about the murals and the post offices. But there was another program that the government invested in state guides for the states. So they hired a whole staff of writers and editors to make these travel guides for each of the states. And that sounds a little superfluous, like in the Depression, but what it was meant to do was introduce America to Americans. And so what they really did was they went to diners and they like found local watering holes and they talked to the people who like lived in the States and they gathered their stories. And they put them into this travel guide and they framed it as a travel guide. But what they were really doing was introducing people to their neighbors. um, and it wasn't the wealthy people who filled the newspapers. It wasn't like, the starlets who made the headlines. They made a concerted effort to talk to women, to talk to former slaves, to talk to Native Americans. They were in the 30s, so I'm not saying they were perfect whatsoever, but they did try to make an effort to actually fill these state guides with the voices of the people. And of course, like, oh, that matches all of my other storylines. So I had to put her in there, and she's based on a bunch of female editors. At the time, they also staffed all these offices, and they were like the best editors, as you can imagine, out of all the states. So I got to get her inspired by a few feisty Hellcats, they were described as editors. And so she goes to Montana and she kind of discovers the boxcar, which is set about 10 years earlier. And there's a bit of mystery and romance and adventure. And I totally forgot about my slides. I'm so sorry. Okay, so that was the boxcar. This is the little compartment that the librarian lived in behind there. The man who went out in real life, this is him. And so I do have another librarian in place. But then yeah, so we got to see I got to see like all of the layout, it was fairly like well documented in a couple articles from like 1924, which was like when it kicked off. But it was all like well thought out. They were able to build bookcases where you could travel and then yeah, have like a little library compartment where he lived. Oh, okay, you can go. And these are the men who used the library and talked about what they were reading and stuff. So it's pretty cool. I got to write so much about Glacier National Park, which was so much fun. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 chapters, but it was so beautiful. They did a whole section in the guidebook about it. And these were chalets that burned down later, but kind of get to see. And that's kind of I included this because I loved how much of Montana I got to put in the book. And I think a lot of people are kind of telling me like, oh, I learned a lot about Montana during this. And I think that's really cool because I love the state. So, and then this is the title page for the guidebook. I just think it's cool seeing old books and like the way history reaches out to all of us, you know? So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. I also learned so much about Montana, and now it's like number 1 on my travel list. So thank you for that. And before we bring everyone back, I just wanted to read. I've never like read a quote from the book before, but this one like brought me to tears. So I wanted to read this quote from Colette. And she's talking to a young boy, and she says, "You don't know the people who read that book before you. You don't know the ones who will read it after you. There are people in the world reading it right now, and some of them are just stopping where you stopped and feeling how you felt. How does that make them not your people?" And that one got me. I think we all feel that way when we're reading, especially right now. And I just wanted to say thank you for this book. So, yeah, and I want to welcome everybody back on camera as well.
How amazing do all these books sound? I'm like, I have a long TBR now.
Wonderful. Okay.
That was, well, we said they were all different, and they are. You all bring such a varied, interesting, page-turning stories to the readers, and we thank you so much for that because we need it. And you've all delivered. And so thank you very much. So we have folks who are watching on Facebook and on Crowdcast. We have a few questions of our own. I would like to go back to Elise for a moment because I want to make sure that folks know about your Instagram page because it's, as I mentioned before, and I want to talk about the story a little bit more, but I also don't want folks to not know about you're a wordsmith. You've written some incredible books, again, about women who maybe haven't had the light shown on them as they should have, and again here in a way. But you're also such a gift, and you're a gifted artist, and the what you show on your page, I mean, the detail of your dollhouses, but not only the dollhouses, the pop-up books that you're creating, they're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Virginia. Boy, I was an art minor in school I was a history major. So it's all really come together. But yeah, thank you so much. I have a lot of fun. I mean, that's funny you mentioned the pop-up books. I did make a little pop-up of a writer's room. I've gotten really into working with paper and miniatures because I teach writing, and one of my writing students sent me an Instagram, or I think it was a TikTok of a video of someone in a library somewhere. I need to look it up, but they were going through an old carton from the 1930s of old butter, like the boxes that sticks of butter or margarine, I don't know, whatever they were using in the 30s came in. And on the backs of the wrappers were dollhouse furniture, like paper dollhouse furniture, things that you could cut out. And I just love that. That was so, Great Depression, making the most out of everything. And I just love that. And it just sort of got me fascinated with like working with paper. So I made like I love making dollhouses for dollhouses. And I made this little like Palm Springs one. Yeah. And this is all on my Instagram. I've had a lot of fun. It all works on Instagram. The little things work well on Instagram, I'm finding.
You
Well,
know,
the patience that you have to make this, and then they're just so beautiful. I also wanted to mention the tunnel cards that you make, and there's one that's inspired by the Seattle Public Library, which is this work
So
of
this is like
art.
Seattle Public Library.
Yeah.
Like stretches out, and there are people at desks and books. And there's a ferry, a Washington State ferry in the very back, but it's hard to see on this camera. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I have
neat.
a lot of fun with that. I listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm working, so that helps. I get a lot of reading in.
I love that. Well, there's endless there's you just so somebody even wrote on your page like, what can't you do?
Oh, I
it's
can't
fabulous.
cook. If you can send dinner tonight, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you though, Virginia. That's so nice of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Just for a second, because we've got 15 minutes left and we want to make sure that we get to everybody. But so the main character, Tildy Barrows, who's the curator of this beautiful library in San Francisco, and I think this is the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know. It looks like it.
It is.
Okay. So she's central, obviously, to the book, and I love the prologue. I was almost thinking of asking you to read some of it, but honestly, everyone, the joy is in the read, because when you start the book, you're you're describing a doll house maker, or I guess a miniaturist. I don't know. Are they the same thing?
I think,
I don't
yeah.
know.
More
Okay.
or less the same.
I mean, that just listening to you, like, I'm listening to you, I'm reading it, but I'm hearing you, and you're talking about all of the detail that goes into the wallpaper and into the walls and the flooring and the everything. It's just, it's so detailed. And then you sort of, I feel like you're sort of, you're sort of out, and then you're honing in, and I just would like you to talk a little bit about the client, and if you can just give folks just a little bit of the wallpaper and what's going on there, and what's the deeper
Yes.
thing.
Okay, so in the prologue specifically, that is getting at these women who were working in Arlington Hall in Washington, D.C., code breaking. We think of, I learned a lot. I read this wonderful nonfiction book about Elizabeth Friedman, which off the top of my head, I can't remember the title. And Code Girls is also fascinating. But codes can live in so many different ways. And like Elizabeth Friedman, who was really a pioneer when it came to code breaking, and she taught everyone sort of all they knew in World War I and then especially in World War II. She would send like a Christmas card that was a little puzzle to people where they had to sort of figure out all the little pictures in it. So codes can live, like you can weave a code, a code, depending on what code you're doing. So codes can exist not only kind of a gibberish, if you open a book and you can't really figure out what it says right away, but also it can exist in sound, things like Morse code, but it can exist in patterns that you see in prints. Like if there is something really small and you're looking closely for it, that could be a code. So I did, after reading that about Elizabeth Friedman, I had to leap on that, this idea of a code being in the wallpaper of this dollhouse that tells the story of that woman's life.
Yes, that's just the hook. And just illuminating, as you say, these overlooked women of the past. It's so rich in history, and it's so beautiful. It works on so many levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. That is working with Minute, and doing it myself is sort of where it gave me all these ideas for how you could hide things in a dollhouse. So this was such fun research.
Yeah, it shows.
Thank you.
Okay, Lainey, Grace, how are we doing on questions?
Yeah. I mean, now that you say that, Elise, I have this memory that comes so to mind, but my grandmother and her sister would play paper dolls in this old barn we have, like on our family property. And every time we go, when he said that, I was like, oh my goodness, she stops by and talks about them each time. She's like, they're still there, our paper dolls. And it's just like such a youthful
Yeah.
memory. Anyway, that's thank
Yeah,
you.
there's
I
definitely a
just
real
remembered that.
nostalgia factor to it. I think so many people, when they've heard about this book, either everyone's like, oh, I wanted a dollhouse and my mother wouldn't let me have one, or people speak very fondly about their dollhouse. And then, even guys like miniature rail trains, that's a whole thing. And then Star Wars figures. I've been amazed at how many guys really latch onto this. And they're like, oh my gosh, I played with Chewbacca and Luke Skywalker, all these figures all over my room. So miniatures, I think they're a way we can feel some control. So when I mentioned earlier that, the 1930s and were a time when people sort of got into miniatures, it's a time when we can kind of look and sort of control the world as we see it, which is, I think, someone had sent me an article in 2020 of modern dollhouses on Instagram from the New York Times. And it was just this amazing look at all these dollhouses being made right now. And I think, 3D printers, like glow forges, all these things have really kind of opened up a world again for miniaturists. And movies use a lot of, the movie Barbie used all these miniatures. So it's funny all the ways they kind of crop up.
Yeah, controlling narratives. None of you probably care about any of that. Speaking of, Will, we have a question from Jennifer Winberry, our friend in New Jersey. It says, how much plotting did you do, and did Lloyd ever take over and do his own thing at any point?
Yeah, this is one of the fun parts about writing novels rather than the journalism I do. It's really fun. They just go off and do their own things constantly. It's I always thought I'd worked on journalism for so long before I started writing novels. I thought, oh, novels will be so easy because I don't have to stick to what actually happened. I can just make the people do what I want. They are stubbornly persistent to that line of thinking. I will say it doesn't work out that way at all. So yeah, Lloyd is very. It was what was interesting is I am not a police officer. I don't know a lot. So I was able to spend a lot of time with some police officers. And one of the things that almost all across the board they wanted to say is like, I'm actually just a person. Like I think people get really caught up in the idea of like they're a police officer, they see a uniform, that people always kind of like straighten up a little bit when they see a police officer. And they're like, and what was fun about Lloyd is not like he had a very domineering father who I think was kind of your stereotypical kind of police officer, and a lot of police officers they come into it from their families, and that's just something they saw like a family tradition to do, and Lloyd kind of got caught up in that too. But what's interesting is Lloyd realizes very early on that's not the kind of police officer I'm being interested in being. The book takes place in Atlanta, and one of the things he talks about is he wants to be a police officer for the community of Atlanta, to reflect the community rather to reflect what the community is and wants to be rather than to try to impose force on it. And it's a very kind of exciting thing to watch, to see him become even a better person as he kind of goes through this ordeal. So yeah, Lloyd took over. I would like to say I wish I were more. This is my second first person novel. How Lucky is also a first person novel, and people often ask like, "Are you like Daniel? Are you like Lloyd?" And I can only say I wish. Like I wish I were more. I am. I'm not. One of my. It's aspirational. Both of them are very good at like embracing life and embracing the present and embracing the world in front of them. That's something I'm working on. And so it's something that I think my characters certainly are aspirational in that. But yeah, they go off on their own. I wish I could make them do what they want, but I just kind of follow along behind them.
I love that. Mm, okay. Just
All right, one sec.
you have something to.
Yeah, one moment. Sorry, a lot of tabs open. Okay. Casey Davis asked of Brianna, when you researched for this novel, what major differences stood out between the past and present when it came to politics, books, and the people of Montana?
There we go. Oh, that's so interesting. There, I would say the similarities were more striking than the differences, in terms of Montana's always been a little weird. They had the first elected female congresswoman. They have very liberal, federal representatives and then more conservative state representatives, and have been very influenced by like what their state produces, so copper and timber, and also they have kind of that wild wilderness, we're surviving on our own kind of mentality. And I think you still see that. Like, I still think you see through lines through the 20s all the way to today. I didn't live there for very long, but I lived there for a few months, and it was kind of, oh, I love it. I love the state. It's so beautiful and rugged, and I feel like the people there are so kind and but also just like very hearty. I think I dedicated the book to anyone who has ever called Montana home. Because it's just such like a unique state. But I think there's a lot of like through lines. I think you saw in the 20s like a lot of union strife, but you saw a lot of union gains. So you have these like really courageous people who are putting their lives on the line for each other and like making sure that like the conditions are better. And I think that you still see that in the current state of Montana too. So yeah, I think there are differences for sure, but yeah, the through lines struck me more.
That's the interesting thing about history, right? Is how similar
Yeah.
it is now.
I always say like people are people no matter what, like for better or worse. And so I always kind of like the 30s really interested me, which is why I wrote Librarian of Burn Books. But the 20s is so fascinating, especially with like the flu and coming back from from the war. And Montana got hit before everybody else did with the depression. So they were going through the depression like long before anybody else was. And so they were just like leaving in droves. Banks were closing. Everyone was losing their mortgages. And then you have all of these headlines that are like, roaring 20s everywhere else. And then it's like Montana is just like super struggling because there was like a drought. And so it's just kind of interesting to see where we're at right now and like where they were at in the 20s. And again, I just think that like if we can like look back and see what connected them and like uplifted them and like fought off, we had a huge fascist movement in the 20s and the 30s. Like there are ways that we can like learn from where we were, and we don't have to repeat everything, hopefully.
So well said. Yeah. So Maxim, I think one thing that has been so lovely about this book is I just wanted to talk to so many people about it. Like there was a lot of conversations that can be sparked, and I think book clubs will be like, this is a great book club book because there's a lot of hypotheticals even to go into. I mean, they're dealing with this disease that's foreign and they don't know how to fight it, and they all have to kind of either come together or be against each other. And so what are some other themes maybe that people could dive into with this book if they're in like a group setting especially?
I think particularly for me, and a theme that I like to work through for this book was this concept of like how one experience can drastically affect people in very different ways. So like for example, like what happens when a parent dies? Like Adira takes on an entirely different perspective and becomes this self-assumed like motherly figure, and her brothers do something a little bit different. And it's like grief affects people, even if it's from the same event, in such intensely different ways. So that was really important to me to play out because especially being the eldest first daughter that Adira is, and close to my heart, and the dedication being it's okay to save yourself first sometimes is really explored throughout this book in particular, because it's really, really easy to fall into these roles of, well, I have to do this. This is the expectation. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then you sort of have to wonder like, well, where's the expectation coming from? Who's putting the shoulds, as I like to say, on it? Is it self-imposed? Is it from society? And does it really matter? And why is their life more important than your life? And all of these sort of internal conflicts that she has and goes through. And then like, it's just sort of an exploration of that, I would just say, assumed role for her specifically. The brothers are just carefree, and they get to be that though because of her assumed role, right? So that's a big one for me. Yeah, that and female rage at the end.
No, that's great. I mean, and fantasy is a great canvas to explore a lot of those things because you can
Yeah.
make those stakes higher and well, I
Yeah.
guess all fiction.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
We are very close to the end of our program, Virginia. Can you believe it?
Oh, Virginia, we
Can't hear
lost
you.
on sound. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, I was so afraid I would talk over myself.
But I did put, Elise had some great links for things, and if there's anybody else links, we can add them, but I stuck them in the chat for a few of the dollhouses, so let me know if there's any others to add. And your Instagram, I put that in there too.
Yeah, I think, when you were saying, Maxim's book is such a good book club book, I'm thinking that all 4 of these books really are such good book club books. There's so much to, as different as they are, they offer so much as far as discussion. And so I just love that. Sometimes it does work and sometimes it doesn't, but honestly, with all 4 of these books, it does work. There's so much to talk about. And we've come to the end of it's 8 o'clock. But I just want to end sort of with that, to say that, these are just wonderful reads, and I love that there's something for everybody here. And each one of these books just brings something to the table here that I think offers everything as a wide readership. So and I would I don't know, I wanted to just read this quick quote for Elise's book. I have quotes in from Marie Benedict and Fiona Davis, and Laurie Frankel says that the Library of Lost Dollhouses is impressively shape-shifting. This is, sort of, a dual timeline, which is kind of cool. And it goes on to say, she went on to say that it's a story that ranges over a century and continents, but it's also a portrait of the artist as a young and not so young woman. It's a coming of age tale too, in fact, but it's also a beguiling mystery. And in every incarnation, it's as inspiring and extravagantly detailed as the miniatures at its heart. That's a lovely quote. And I think we'll probably end on that. Although if we want to go around one last minute, if we want to ask all the authors, either if there's something you're reading that you're loving, or if there's something that you want people to take away from your book, if there's a thought or a feeling or a sentiment or something that you just hope that after reading your book, that says you envision them taking away a certain something. So anyway, why don't we just go around the virtual table here, and whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I'll go.
Thank you.
Oh, got it. Don't worry. I know the book question always stumps everybody, myself included. I was prepared this time. So I'll kind of quickly answer both. For mine, it's just really that concept of that I already touched on. It's like I really want people to understand like the nuances of self-care and how that looks in a fantasy world, and like your societal expectations and overcoming that. For me, in terms of what I'm reading right now, I actually haven't been reading because I've been drafting, and I try not to read when I draft at the same time. So I just finished my drafting, and I have 2 books that are like on my radar, and I try really hard to be intentional and read like diverse books whenever I can to like just sort of uplift. So like rising tide helps all ships, and I love learning about all these other cultures. So I want to call out 2 books. I'm about to immediately dive into the 4th book in the Artifacts of Orno series by Nisha J. Tooley, Tale of Heart Queen, I believe. I really hope I just said that right. Tale of the Heart Queen, yes.
Tale of the Heart Queen.
Oh my gosh, the cliffhanger in book 3 has had me on edge for like months. I like messaged her, I was like, this is really unfair. So that's what I'm reading first, and then I just picked up like one click by today because I'm so hooked by this. It's called Saints of Storm and Sorrow, and it's a Filipino-inspired fantasy debut with a bisexual nun, and I love everything about that, and I love this concept. Like, I read one of her author notes about like the Filipino dragon that's in there. It's like Laho or Lo. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm just so excited to learn more about like these other cultures and how their fantasy plays into what they're writing. So, next.
Great. Lainey, was there a quick question for
Oh, just somebody asked if you're gonna have a third book in the series, but it's a duology. It's a duology, that's all I'm gonna say, but
It's a duology.
okay.
I have a 3-book contract,
Well, that's
and that's
exciting.
all I can say.
Okay, all right.
I love that body language.
I didn't know that that was gonna be a controversial question, but I'm very excited that it is.
Just so
Opportunity in my mind for an offshoot, so we'll see.
Okay, well, he hot off the press. Okay.
Cool.
just so everyone knows, I am writing down the author recommendations. So if I do ask you, wait, can you say that title one more time? It's because I'm putting them in a catalog for everyone. So
Okay, I can go next. First off, I have to say, for my book, I'm gonna skip. My book is that imagine what if you only had 3 months left, what you would say and how you would feel and what you would try to settle the agenda for where you are and where the people you love are. In my book, I am so delighted. I am Kevin Wilson is a longtime friend of mine. I'm very delighted to be reading Run for the Hills right now. And by right now, I mean I picked it up. I got my copy of it yesterday, and I'm almost done because I have been salivating to read Kevin's new book, and you're not going to be disappointed. So Kevin is a very he is a fellow Southern author. So I see him down here usually once or twice a year, and when he told me about this book, I was like, oh, that's going to be good, and it is.
I just finished it. It's a fun ride, pun intended.
I'm so excited. I didn't know he has a new book out, and I love his book, so I'm very excited. I just finished Ruthie Thorpe's Margot Has Money Trouble on audiobook, read by Dakota Fanning, and that was fantastic. I think I finished it in like a day and a half. We went on so many long walks, my dog was going on strike. I just wanted to walk and listen.
Talk about another wild ride. That's a fun one.
Right.
That's so high on my to read list. I just finished All the Colors of the Dark, which I know everybody has read already. I feel like I'm late to the party, by Chris Whitaker. I was crying. I couldn't read another book for a couple days. I was just like so moved by the ending of that book. Like that it was a masterclass of relationship building and character building. Oh, one of my favorite books of the year. I loved it. It was so good. So, anyways, I know everyone recommends it, but it deserves the buzz.
Well, you just did it. That's great. Hey, listen, we've kept you over the hour, but it's been such a wonderful conversation and just so great. What a gift for all of us to hear all of you talk about your books, your research, all the work that you put into it, all the fun that you had, and off they'll go into the world before you know it. So the Boxcar Librarian by Brianna Labuskes goes on sale March 4th. The Library of Lost Dollhouses by Elise goes on sale April 1st. House of Blight by Maxym Martineau goes on sale April 8th. And Lloyd McNEIL'S Last Ride by Leitch goes on sale May 20th. And that's all in 2025. And speaking of 2025, we wish you all a very happy and healthy and safe and peaceful new year and happy holidays. And thank you so much for coming on tonight. And to everyone who took the time to watch, thank you. And for those who are going to watch it in replay, thank you. We just so appreciate you authors and all that you do for us, for librarians, and for patrons, for getting these wonderful stories out there and into the hands of hungry readers. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, and don't forget, what's our next one? Do we have a slide up for the next one? Can we do it one more
Yep,
time?
I just circled through it. It was January 9th is the one with Mary Alice Monroe and Kevin Wilson. And then February 11th is the next one. And then the next is March 11th. It just happened to work out. It was both 11s.
Fun.
And you
All
can go to
right.
Crowdcast and sign up for information, and you'll get those right into your inbox. So it's all set.
And tell your friends and colleagues. All right, everyone, take good care. Have a lovely evening. And thank you again for all you do. Good night, everyone.